React using React hooks. No Redux, no state management library, just React hooks. And this is inspired by a live stream that I watched from Tanner Lindsley, where he kind of controlled global state with React and without using like libraries or anything or a state management system. And it really gave me the understanding of kind of using this global state to control things like authentication in your app, which I was already implementing for something else I was building. And so this can be the part one of multiple series, but because in part two we're going to go into how to do multiple different global states. So like auth, maybe like sidebar open or modals, something that the entire application would need to know that is going on like a global state. So we're going to go over how to handle multiple different global states with one state in React hooks. But this is part one. We'll just start with setting up authentication, which is something that I know a lot of people run into. We're going to be using Firebase and React hooks. So a lot of people have asked me like how to get set up with authentication. What do you do? So for the most part, this is what I'll be using going forward. I'm not saying it's going to be like an every time, like it would be like this every time. I'm just saying this kind of generic. We're going to be using actually from Gabe Ragland's usehooks.com. We're going to be using this use auth hook that he kind of authored and produced. We're going to be changing it around just a bit, but this is going to be the general theme of the kind of hook we'll be using. We're going to use it here on Code Sandbox, so I can just link it into the video description. We don't have to worry about, it being on my machine, pushing it to get all that. We'll just use Code Sandbox. So I'm actually going to come here. I think I have it right. Yeah, we're going to create a Next.js sandbox just because I like Next.js a lot. I use it for a lot of things. So we're going to start with that. We're going to kind of get rid of some of this stuff that we will not need. Keep the about page, why not? I'm going to add a components folder. So we're going to throw our hooks and some of our components up in there. All right. So to get started, we'll actually you'll need to create a Firebase account if you do not have one, because that's the database we'll be using for the authentication. It's just super easy to get started with Firebase. It's super easy to get going. It's super easy to set up. It's secure. It handles a lot of the stuff for you that you don't really, I wouldn't say need to worry about. You do definitely need to worry about it, but it kind of handles a lot of that stuff that you might be spending a lot of time over, kind of getting stuck on. It handles it for you. So you can just click get started. I already have mine set up, so I'm not going to actually go through it with you, but as you can see, it'll log you in with your Google account. You just can go ahead, click add a project. You can see I added one right here. I call it React Auth. We'll click on it. When you add it, I can't remember exactly what it's going to look like because I've already added the database on there and stuff. But you're going to need to get the credentials for that project. They always move it, and I always forget where it's at, and I always like spend like 10 minutes trying to find it. Oh, that's right. You're going to want to link an application to it. So you'll somewhere on here should be like you can link like a web application. You'll click that. It'll take you to something to where you can name it and all this stuff. So you want to get all that config. It looks something like, if I can find it. So I really don't want to show mine. Not that it really matters, but where is it at on here? It'll look like this. Like, you'll have your API key, auth domain, project ID, app ID. So that kind of stuff. You're going to grab that, set that stuff up. We're not going to go over that in here. If you do want me to go over that, leave a comment, message me something, and we can go over that in a live stream, like actually setting up Firebase. But it's pretty easy. It's really well documented, so it shouldn't be too hard to kind of to find. But if you do want to go over that, let me know, and we can do that for sure, for sure. So we're going to get rid of kind of some of this stuff. All right, now let's get moving. All right, so guys, we're going to get going now. Sorry about that. Whatever you want to call that, I guess, technical difficulties, whatever. So we're going to try this now. We're going to try this again. Cool. Okay, sweet. So let's go into the components folder. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create a file. We're going to want to create our use auth hook. This is where we're pretty much going to control everything that has to do with auth management. In this hook right here, it's going to allow us to, have the control that we want, have the functions that we need, have the state that we need, and this is what we're going to pass down to the context provider to the rest of our app. So I'm going to import some things. Use state, use effect. Use state, of course, to control the state. Use effect so we can reload the state or reload the app that's using all of these dependencies when the user changes. So like if the user logs in, or eventually when we start updating the user, we're going to want the app to update because we're obviously going to have new information about the user. Before I do this, let's import Firebase stuff. Firebase. And I know like you should essentially not have to do Firebase since we're doing all the separate ones, but I found that it just did not work unless I also imported Firebase, which was kind of weird to me, but we'll just roll with it. Sorry y'all hear noise in the background. That is my dog Louie. He's playing with a toy. Alright. So import all from Firebase. Firebase app. Import Firebase all. Import. All right, so right here is where you're going to initialize your Firebase app. So usually we would just go Firebase.initialize app, and this is where you're going to throw all those keys that we have in earlier. You know what? I'm just going to grab them because I don't think it matters if y'all see these anyways. That's where we throw in all these. I mean, if y'all want to attack this database, it's literally like one user, so I don't think there's going to be anything that you want from this. But anyways, this is where you're going to throw in all your stuff. You can try and set up environment variables with Next and all that. It's kind of a headache sometimes. I've realized we don't have a server on this, it's just client side. So, do with that as you'd want, but it's up to you. Also, I've ran into issues only on Code Sandbox. This it's saying it's already declared, so it's redeclaring the app every time after we've already made it, which is obviously a problem because it's saying we have duplicate Firebase installs. So what you kind of have to do is we have to check if it's already been created. So if we don't have this, then we'll want to. So what we're pretty much saying here is, hey, if you don't have any Firebase apps, if you can't find any, go ahead and initialize it. Else, if you can, just call the Firebase app that we already have created. So that's what we have to do because the way Code Sandbox kind of reloads that, it'll keep trying to reload the same instance as a new instance of Firebase, but we've already created it, so it's going to throw an error. So we'll do that. Okay, so I'm going to scroll up on that just to not leave that up there just for my own paranoid sake. So now we're going to set up the context. So we're going to export this. So of course that we can wrap our app around the context, but we want it to live here because this is where all of our auth context state functions will live in this hook file. So we're going to create the auth context here, but we're going to export it. So we're going to create the context. Okay, so we have our auth context. So now we need our provider that's going to be the wrapper that we're going to wrap the app around. We're going to export that from this as well. And in this provider, we're going to provide all the functions from our hook. So we're going to export a function called provide auth. And this is all from Gabe's use auth hook. I'm just kind of explaining it, kind of what he's doing here. And we are going to manipulate it just a bit, but this is pretty much just like he had it. Children, because we're going to need the props for the children, because the children prop is going to be our app essentially that this wraps. So, and then we are going to grab an auth value from a function called use provide auth, and this is where pretty much all of the functionality is going to live. All of our Firebase functions are going to be, our Firebase calls are going to be wrapped into functions or constants that are calling a function that we can use throughout our app and call throughout our app. And we're going to pass this down as the value for the provider. So we're going to actually return the auth context provider. The value that we're passing that provider, of course, is going to be auth, like I said. And then we're going to want the children. Sorry, I keep looking around my mic because I do look at my keyboard sometimes when I'm typing. It's just out of, I guess, out of like, what's it called? Habit? Yeah. So now we're going to actually return, create our hook. So the use auth hook, which is going to use the context that we created. So export comments, use auth. So we're calling a hook inside a hook, which is legal to do. So what right here is we're setting up our actual use auth hook that we're going to call inside of the functions that are, or inside the components that are using this hook. And this is what's going to allow us to have access to the all the things inside of our provider. So as you would usually, you wrap your app in the provider, then the component that you want to use, you give it the context, so as it available to the value that's in the provider. But we're going to use the use context hook in React. We're going to export it, our auth context, to be able to use it in any component that we import this into. So only components that need to use the auth information, we'll use it. So if we have, say a couple pages that don't need to know the auth information, that way we're uploading the auth user. Updating the auth user, or something's updating, those components aren't going to update unless they need to with the new information. So this allows us to only use the context on components that we need. So that's why we're going to export that as well. All right, so now we're going to create this use provide auth hook. And what this is going to do pretty much is give us access to all the things that we're going to need from Firebase, all our Firebase functions, all of our updaters, all the things like that we're going to use throughout our app. So we'll create a function, use provide auth, and we're going to have a use state function here, and this is going to control the state of the user. So we're always going to store the user in this state, so we can update all the components based on this user state. So if the user updates, we can update this component. So say Office is going to start as false. We don't have a user, but when we log in, we'll update the state of this component, thus re-rendering components that rely on a user, so they know whether a user's logged in or not. They can grab certain values from a user. Say a user has a first name and we update it. We want the apps that use the user to, or the components, that use the user information to update as well, so they have the updated information. So we're just going to give it, we're going to wrap, let me create the state first. So pretty much a basic setup here. Hello. Type. No, of course, to start because we don't have a user. So now we're going to create. We're going to wrap our Firebase functions in functions that we can call and export. So you could do this really with any auth provider. It's stated on there. We just happen to use Firebase. He happens to use Firebase. It's also what I'm familiar with, so we're going to use Firebase. But you can wrap these functions with any auth provider. They essentially, you can change them in and out. So we're going to do it like this. Say we want to write a sign-in function. sign in equals, we need to have our parameters, email, password, of course. And as a callback function. And we're going to return the callback Firebase.auth. And these are just regular Firebase functions that Firebase ships with. Firebase ships with this sign in with email and password function. So Firebase ships with that. It's nothing you have to do to get it. It's just provided in their API. So we are going to wrap that Firebase call in this sign-in const that is going to have a callback that's going to call this. It's going to return this function. And then we'll have a callback. And then we're going to grab the response. So after Firebase runs this function, it throws the user back to you. So we're going to grab it, call a new function, use response as the parameter, and we're going to call our set user hook and do response.user. So we can now set that user as our user. We're going to return the user. Oops. We're going to return the user as well from this function. So we're going to set the user now with our hook right here. So as you can see now, whenever a user signs in or someone signs in, we're going to update our state from being null or no user to the user that we had from the sign. So call it sign up. And we're going to do the same thing with other functions. Okay. So return Firebase.auth. I can't remember what it is. Create user. Yeah, Firebase name these. Very descriptive and very long. And then same thing, they're going to return the user to you. So we're going to take that user, that response that has the user in it, set user response.user, and return response.user again. I guess so. Continuing that, we're also going to go. So we have sign in, sign up, sign out, and we're not going to do anything for sign out. And now we want to set our user to false. We don't actually need the response. So now we no longer have a user, so we'll set the user to false. And so this is how you'll do pretty much any of your Firebase auth functions. So reset password, reset email. If you want to verify password, Firebase comes with all those auth things provided for you, already having in this Firebase.auth library that we imported. They come with all these things for you. So this is how you'll set them up. You'll just wrap them in a const, use a callback to provide the parameters, and call those return those functions. So now we're going to use effect, and this is what I talked about earlier, as we need the app to reload essentially every time the user changes. So Firebase has an API pattern where you create a const that's called unsubscribe, and you're calling it. It's hard to explain. So you're calling it to. You're gonna call the function unsubscribe, and it's gonna call the auth state change. It's gonna check. It's gonna listen to see if the auth changes or not, and we can unsubscribe from listening to that when it changes and when it's set. So this is kind of how we're gonna do it. That was a terrible description, but yeah. I'll be able to explain it all right now. And this is another Firebase provided function. So on auth state change, user. So if we have a user, set user. Crap. I'll set it to false. So the first part of this, as you can see, we made this function, or this const, that has a callback function that is calling, that is set equal to Firebase to auth, the on state change. And what that's doing is it's in Firebase to auth, the on state change is saying, hey, we realized the auth user that Firebase is given has changed, is either signed in or signed out. This is something new, this is something different, and so it returns that user value to us. So if the user signed in, we'll get a user back. If we have a user, we want to set it. If we do not, we want to set the user to false, thus telling the app that the user signed out. So what you can do is return this way, and what it's going to do is be able to check and listen and call unsubscribe whenever the Firebase auth changes, and it'll pretty much stop listening for the user when the user logs out. That way you won't get an error from Firebase saying, hey, you're trying to listen for something that you don't have control over, because you'll get an error from Firebase if you're trying to listen for a user. Like if you log out, you don't unsubscribe from an auth state change, then Firebase will pretty much say, hey, like you're trying to listen to something that you don't have control over. So that is going to handle that. All right. And after this, we need to pass in the dependency array for the use effect, which is, not going to put that there, which is telling it, as you know, if you use effect, this dependency array is telling it, hey, whenever things in this change, you need to re-update, and if you don't provide anything, then it'll only update on mount, so it will only run once. Now I know there's some arguments as to whether you are or not supposed to use an empty dependency array, but here we're going to use it because we really only want this to run once when the app mounts, and then because the unsubscribe function is going to take care of the rest for us. So we only want this to update though when the user logs in and out. So that's what that essentially is for. These functions will take care of updating the user, which will then update the value. So that our context provider will automatically update. So we don't need this use effect update based on user. We need to update based on logging in and out. So, and now we're almost at the end. We're just going to return all these values from this, so they have access to them in all the parts of the app. Now, whenever we use this use provide auth, right here, we're pretty much saying, hey, this auth context is equal to the user from this use state and equal to this sign up, sign out, this sign in, sign up, and sign out functions that we have here. All these returning all these Firebase actions. That auth value that we passed as the value into this provider is going to be equal to all those. So we're essentially giving power over all of these tools to this auth variable right here. We're going to pass it into the value to the provider, thus giving it to the context, and we can import that into the components and give them access to all of these tools. So I know that was a lot, but you'll see here in a second when we kind of wrap these, what we're going to do. So in Next.js, there's a underscore app.js page you can have to where you can kind of alter the container of your Next.js app and kind of give a top level view over your pages. So we're going to go ahead and create that file to override their default. And you can grab Next.js's default from their GitHub. They have a bunch of different, actually let's just go back. I think it's on here, yes. Custom app. So this is what we want. We want to grab this, paste this here. We don't need to worry about that. So bam, this is pretty much a custom app bare bones that you get they give you the component and the page props. The component, of course, is your entire app, pretty much. The page props is the way that they pass down the top level props to your app in Next.js. So let me see this. What we want to do is really simple. We just pretty much want to wrap our entire app with the provider, with the provider auth. So we're going to import provide auth. And remember, this is the provider from our context. So this is the provider from our context. So it's the same thing as wrapping whatever you have in a provider. So that's essentially what we're doing. And remember, we already passed in the value. We'll go back and look at it. Come back here. All right, okay, so we'll go to this first, use provide auth. Nope, provide auth. Here it is. So this is what we're wrapping the app in pretty much, and that's why we had to pass the children for the props. So what we're doing is we're wrapping our app with the auth context.provider, and we're passing the value. So the same general thing, we're just wrapping in this function first to provide it with this use provide auth as our provider. Since it lives here, we can pass it in, easy peasy. And then we have it here. It looks really nice and neat. Pass in provide auth, and it's going to give that context component to our entire app, which is right here. Give that a save. Didn't have the final. Give that a save. There we go. And because it's prettier, it makes it look all good. Okay, sweet. So what we're doing now is passing that that context into our application. And to really get to see that, we're going to do something pretty basic. We're going to go to our home page, and remember I told you that whatever component we wanted to have access to that context provider, we just pretty much had to import the use auth function that we exported here, which is right here. We just have to import this use auth function because it's giving us the entire context using our use context. So it's giving us the auth context, which is going to give us the create context, which is going to give us all the values that we have from our value prop passed into the provider. So, and it's kind of confusing if you don't understand the context API in React. So I highly suggest going to their docs and looking at that. I'm doing a terrible job explaining. I'm a very terrible explainer, which I really need to be better at because they say you only really understand something if you can explain it. So I will do my due diligence and go back and read over that too, because I do want to be able to explain that better to y'all and really give a better overview. So yeah, I understand that I need to work on that as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretty much just do something super simple just to make sure that we have it. Don't care about syntax, it'll fix itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab user from using object extraction, use auth. So what we're doing is, this is essentially the same as saying that auth value we have, but we're just going to destructure it, grab just the user, because remember this is the user that we're returning here, so it's essentially our state from this use provide auth. It's this same user right here is what we're importing here. So that's what we're grabbing, and we're going to just say user welcome else you need to log in. Yeah. Guess we would help if we import this, wouldn't it? undefined. Cannot read user of undefined. Wonder why it's saying it's undefined. Exporting a user. We shouldn't have a user yet, so it should just be null, but it should still be able to recognize the user. So what we'll do is this. Okay, do this. We should be able to inspect and see the So this is our app pages component. As you can see, there's the page props we pass down to it. There's the value from the context, but it is empty. Definitely not be empty because even if the user is null, we still have functions that we pass down to it as well. So it should not be null. I wonder if some of this stuff comes to me from a lack of understanding of Code Sandbox. Sometimes some of the things that it's doing. Use auth, use context, auth context, yes. Train the user. Use provide auth. Values auth. Oh, I think it has something to do with the fact that we changed the app folder. I think we need to Oh no. I don't need to build it. I feel like there's a way to do that, right? To stop your app and like rerun it. I think because we changed the app, it needs to rerun the app to grab the. Well, no, because it was passing down the auth, so that wouldn't make any sense. Hmm. Hmm. We're gonna see what happens. I don't know. Because this did happen to me the first time I was building it, and I came back to it and it worked. So that's why I'm thinking like maybe the that's why I'm thinking maybe it needs to rebuild. Not completely sure. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. There's no way for me to like stop it. I don't think so. Let's see. So the context value is passing an empty. I'm just not sure why. I can't remember what I did on the other one to get it to pick up the context value. Yeah, I figured it'd be undefined because it doesn't have anything. Cannot remember what I did. Just try it, see if that works again. I know there's got to be a way that I'm doing something wrong with Code Sandbox, you know, because it's definitely me. Like, I'm definitely the one that's messing it up. It's definitely not a problem with the product because they're amazing. Okay, let's see. Oh, that's wrong. Oh, that's why. This one? Yes. That's still definitely undefined for this. It might be. No, I don't think it's the fact I'm using the same Firebase. Yes. Let's see if I can find a reason. Excuse me. Just had a reason, like why it wasn't working. Let's see, maybe we did something wrong. He says cause auth equals use auth.user. Yeah, it should be that simple. Provide auth. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go to this one where it does work. Okay. And we're just gonna show you how it works in this one. Okay, so we're gonna be on this one. This is the one that does work. I'm not gonna waste any time on it. I don't want to waste y'all's time. So this one does work. It is getting it. And so if you can see here, we have the same provide. You go to index. You can kind of see what I have over here. We'll go to a navbar function. We have a navbar function that is importing use auth. It's getting the user and sign out from the use auth hook that we created. And it's saying, hey, is there a valid user? Then show them this account's link. It's just write your link and a logout button. If there's not, show them the site name. So as you can see, we don't have anybody logged in right now. So it's just showing the site name. And if we go back to our index page, we're doing the same thing. We're on our default home page. And of course, you would separate this up a lot better. And you could kind of condense these into one function and kind of grab, like whether you want sign in, log in. I know all that, but this is just for the purpose of this demo, just to show you how to control overall global state using React hooks, which is what we've achieved. So I want to show you all that. So this is the power of this. Look what we're able to do. We're able to be in this on our home page. We're able to say, hey, we're going to import the user. All we want is the user state from useauth. And we're going to say, hey, return our nav bar. If there's a user, return welcome and return the user email. It's just the one thing that Firebase saves from the bat from when you create your account with email password, so it's easy to grab. So we're just going to say, hey, show me the user email. And if not, show the sign-up form and the sign-in forms. So on our sign-in forms, and the sign-up form is pretty much going to follow the exact same way, we're just going to pull in that sign-in function from our auth. We're going to have a simple state management with hooks. We're going to control the email and password state. We're going to have a handle sign-in. That's going to pretty much call the function that we grabbed right here and sign them in with the email and password. Remember, these are the same functions that we're exporting right here. So we're passing in that email password into Firebase, telling it, hey, log them in. We respond with the user, and we set that user to the state. So we're controlling the entire state of the app just from this one use auth hook, and we're pulling in just the different pieces into the different components that we need. Nobody's getting bloated with extra functions or anything that they don't need. This is not like Redux where I have to give them this user, the sign in, the login, log out, all to every component. I can only give this component exactly what it needs, which is really cool because I've built this exact same thing with Redux. And granted, I could have built it better probably because I built this from like a year ago in this old example that I'm referring to, but still, like just going from Redux to this, and this is so lightweight, this is so flexible. I love it. So we're just gonna have a simple form we return, simple input group on change, of course using hooks to update that value, and the button has a simple on click that calls our handle sign in. I know it could just call it from here, whatever. You can have the callback, call the sign in from here, whatever. I just wanted to show how you can kind of use these functions however you want. So let's say we want to sign up. We're going to go ahead and enter a name. Call it Mike. Password. Email Michael Outliers. Password. And click sign up. Boom. And as you can see, because that user state changed, it reloaded the app. Because we set user, the user value changed, so that context updated. So now we're able to update the app based on the user. So now we see this code instead of this code because we have a user, which is super cool. I didn't have to do like, well, if you had this separate into pages, like you want to take them to the dashboard, you could have done like a history.push or something of those kind of things. But this simple form is kind of like that. It's kind of replicating that using this. So boom, now we're logged in. Now we can see we can have access to our account page and welcome Michael at outliers.com. So now we're controlling the entire state of the authentication, the entire React auth with just that one hook. That one hook, the one page, the one context, one provider, where the entire app now has control over the authentication state if we want that component to. If we don't want the component to have control, then we don't have to give it control. We don't have to pass the use auth hook into it, thus not giving it the context. So we don't even have to worry about it. We don't have to update that component for the auth change if we don't want to. Unlike Redux, where if our auth changes, then we have to reload everything that's relying on that store. So that's really cool. So we can go ahead and show log out. We can log out. Boom, we're back here. Now something that's cool. Firebase, when you save, it actually saves the user to an authentication I'll show you this real quick. It's saving the user for like authentication. I'll show you in here. So we come here. And so what we're doing when we create a user, we'll go to authentication. I'll show you. This is the user I just created, Michael et al. That user was already there. We just created this user, Michael et al. So this is where this is where Firebase naturally saves a user that you signed in with. Well, this is great, but it's very limited. All we have access to here really is like some obscure data. We have the unique ID, we have the email, but it's kind of obscure. It's just not, it's not custom enough. We want to be able to save, first name, last name, whatever other account information maybe. Maybe we want to save all that stuff together on sign up instead of having them do it later and add it, yada yada. So really cool way to extend the use hooks that you saw from the video earlier. Go here. You can see on this sign up function that we had earlier, where everything is the same except when we get back the word user. And this is the great thing about Firebase, the fact that they return the user back to you in this response. So now we want to save the user to our own collection with custom attributes. So what I'm saying is we want to save the user to our own collection in our own database. So if you go back to your Firebase, if you go back to your project overview, down here, if you don't have it set up, it'll let you click database and you can click Firestore, which is what I did, and you can create your own database, give it a name, or give it whatever it needs, and it'll be ready to go. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to set up any collections, nothing. You don't have to do anything else. Just set up the database on there, click Firebase or Firestore or real-time database, whichever one you want to do. And so then we're going to have this function, this little small function, save user to database. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that response that we got, we're going to pass that user in, and we're going to pass in this name. As you can see now, the sign up callback has a name attribute. If you go back to our form, you can see right here, we are collecting a name. The sign up form now has a name use state, and we're just collecting a simple name. We're passing name into the sign up function as well. So in there, it's just showing that you can collect anything. You can collect name, date, birth, all that stuff, put in an object and pass that object to you. You don't have to pass each individual variable, so you have a ton of variables in your parameters. You can just pass in an object with all that information here. So then we're going to call our own custom another function here that's going to say save user to database response.user, passing pretty much the user that we get from Firebase, because we're going to need that user's unique ID to save it to our own collection, because I think it's easier just to keep their same unique IDs across authentication and across your own custom database set. So we're going to pass those two things into this function. What this function is going to do is really simple. It's just going to be an async function. We're going to call the database from Firestore. So we're going to need to import Firebase/Firestore, and then create a const database equals Firebase.Firestore. So what that's going to do is connect you to your Firestore database that you just created. It's a little different if you use real-time database. Pretty much the same thing, but just a little different on the syntax. You're obviously not going to be calling Firestore. So all that's saying is, hey, give me access to that Firestore database that we created earlier. So we're going to await that database because we're going to need that. Then we're just going to do exactly like we did before with the Firebase auth function. We're going to do database function. So we're going to return database.collection, and this is all Firebase syntax, so you can look it up. They have great documentation on their website. Go ahead and look it up. I don't want to really get too deep into that right now because this is really like a basic query, so you can look it up, find information on how to add, write, query data, all that. Firestore is a little different. They don't have like logical ORs and certain things like that, but for the most part, they talk about workarounds and things like that. But back to this, we're going to return database.collection. So collection is it's a NoSQL database, so it's not like SQL where it's tables and all that. It's all stored in JSON. So we'll look at it like this. This is going to be our collection. As you can see, collection users. Then a document is I guess you could say a piece in that JSON tree. So we're going to use a unique ID as a unique identifier here to grab it, and then we're just going to set their fields in here. So as you can see, collection users doc, that unique ID, just so we can keep them. So say you want to look for a user. Well, you have their unique ID. It's very easy to pull them back if you already know their unique ID or if you can grab it. That's why it's a good thing to store them by their unique ID. So we're going to do set. Since we don't have this user yet, we're going to use set. Set will wipe out anything that is in there before for that document. So you only want to use this when you're creating something new. You don't want to use this when you're adding unless you have like a merge prop in there. But like I said, all this is on Firestore documentation, so I don't want to get too deep into that. But we're going to set their ID because we also want to go ahead and just track that under the user as ID, name, email as the user.email. And that's why I said to pass in that response.user, so you have access to their ID and their email that they already signed up with. And then we're going to set the user as user. And it is going to finish with returning the user. So what that gets you is it creates a users collection for you. And if it already has it, then it uses it. But if you don't have any users, you don't have any collections, it's fine. It'll go ahead and create it for you. It sets that unique ID, and there's our email, our ID, and our name. So that is how you can replicate and start creating your own data sets under your own database instead of just under the Firebase authentication, which is a little bit different to use. It's not really like a database or a data storage that you want to use. It's really just for authentication purposes. But if you also want to use Firebase as your database and you want to start storing user data, user profile data, users, whatever you need for your app, this is an easy way to set them up when they create their account. So you don't have to duplicate this later. You don't have to do all this later. You can easily do it as soon as they update their account, and now you can start adding and manipulating their data from the get-go. So as you can see, with React hooks, we are able to set up global state for our app. We have all our authentication. We can sign in. We can sign up for an account. We can log in. Let's go ahead and show logging in. This is the account we just made. Log in, boom. And now we're logged in. We can see our email right here. We can go to our account page. I don't have it set up, so I'm not going to click it. We can log out. And so we have pretty much our entire state is controlled in React with hooks. No state management, no provider. And now I know this is like a dirty example. This is like a baseline dirty example, but this is to show the power that hooks can provide very easily, setting up global state without a state manager. You didn't need to have Redux in a store and actions, reducers, and all that stuff is great for its provided uses, but sometimes we don't need all that. And coming from a project that I've just finished up where I use Redux to control the state, authentication state, and now I see the power to use hooks, it's completely mind-blowing. And yeah, so this is how I set it up. This is how I'm going to be setting up my authentication for the most part from projects here going forward using hooks. I'm super excited about the power of hooks and just all this stuff. And so this is the first part, like I said, of a video series. Next, we're going to show how to use multiple global states with just one provider. Now you can nest providers. So what you could do is just like nest. You can have your provider hook here. You can have maybe a modal, provide sidebar, all these provide cart. So all these things kind of nested, or we can have one provider and control global state that way. So we'll be going over that in the next video. Hopefully we won't run into so many problems. I'm going to try and learn more about Code Sandbox. As you can see, I just started using it as a way to be able to show these videos, well, as a way to show these videos to y'all and give y'all the code without having, worry about Git and GitHub and doing all that. We could just all share the same code and look at it together. So if you like this video, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. If you got anything from it, give it a thumbs up. If you have any suggestions for me or how I can get better, leave them down below. Any tips with Code Sandbox, leave them down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you checking it out. Yeah, that's it. You have a great day. God bless.